Right, here's a question for you. What if I told you that most self-help advice is complete and utter rubbish? That the stuff people have been peddling for decades, visualize your goals, suppress negative thoughts, vent your anger, is actually making things worse? I know, sounds harsh, but stay with me, because today I'm going to tell you about a chap called Oliver Wright. 34 years old, secondary school history teacher in Hackney, East London. Recently single, slightly overweight, perpetually stressed, and absolutely drowning in self-help books that weren't helping. Ollie, everyone called him Ollie, was the kind of bloke who'd read The Secret and genuinely tried visualizing a parking space outside Tesco. Spoiler, it didn't work. He was still circling the car park like everyone else. But then Ollie discovered a book that was different. A book written by an actual psychologist who'd spent years looking at what the research actually says about changing your life. That book was 59 Seconds by Richard Wiseman. And mate, it absolutely turned everything Ollie thought he knew on his head. Today, I'm going to walk you through Ollie's journey. How he went from skeptical, burnt out, and stuck to genuinely transformed, using techniques that take less than a minute to implement. 59 seconds to be precise. Oh, and before we dive in, if you're new to the channel, welcome. We explore ideas that actually work, backed by proper evidence, not just vibes. If that sounds like your sort of thing, you know what to do. Subscribe button's right there. Cheers. Right then, let's meet Ollie properly. Picture this. It's a rainy Saturday afternoon in November. Classic British weather. Grey skies, that fine drizzle that somehow gets you wetter than actual rain, general atmosphere of mild despair. Ollie is sat in his flat in Stoke Newington. Nice enough place, bit cramped. The kind of flat where you can hear your neighbours having arguments about whose turn it is to empty the bins. And surrounding him, scattered across his bed, his desk, and most of the floor, are self-help books. We're talking at least 30 of them. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Think and Grow Rich. You Can Heal Your Life. Awaken the Giant Within. The whole lot. Ollie had been collecting these for about 5 years. Every time he felt stuck, he'd buy a new one. Every January, he'd pick a different life-changing book to be his guide for the year. And here's the thing, he actually read them. Cover to cover. Highlighted passages, made notes, the lot. Nothing changed. Well, that's not entirely true. One thing changed. He got increasingly cynical. Every book promised transformation. Every book had testimonials from people whose lives had been completely revolutionized. And yet Ollie was still sat in the same flat, doing the same job, feeling the same vague sense of dissatisfaction. He'd started to wonder if the problem was him. Maybe he just wasn't trying hard enough. Maybe he wasn't believing strongly enough. Maybe he was fundamentally broken. His mate Charlie, they'd known each other since teacher training, noticed Ollie was spiralling. They were in the pub after work, the Dove in Hackney, proper old-school boozer, and Charlie said something that landed. Mate, you've read more self-help books than anyone I know. Has any of it actually helped? Ollie laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. Honestly, I think some of it's made things worse. Charlie nodded. My sister's a psychologist. She says most of that stuff isn't even backed by evidence. It's just people making things up that sound good. Ollie went home that night and did something he should have done years ago. He Googled self-help books backed by science. And that's when he found Richard Wiseman. Now, Richard Wiseman isn't your typical self-help guru. For starters, he's an actual professor of psychology at the University of Hertfordshire. He's spent decades conducting proper scientific experiments, the kind with control groups and peer review and all that, on what actually works when it comes to changing behaviour. And 59 Seconds is essentially his attempt to separate fact from fiction. To look at all those popular self-help techniques and ask, but does this actually work? Spoiler, a lot of it doesn't. And one of the biggest offenders? Positive visualization. This is the idea, pushed by books like The Secret, that if you vividly imagine yourself achieving your goals, you'll somehow manifest them into reality. Picture yourself thin and you'll lose weight. Picture yourself rich and money will flow to you. That sort of thing. Ollie had done this religiously. Every morning for about 6 months, he'd spent 10 minutes visualizing himself in his dream scenario. Fit, confident, maybe dating that woman from the yoga class. Definitely not marking Year 9 essays at 11 p.m. Didn't work, obviously. Here's what Wiseman found when he looked at the research. Positive visualization doesn't just fail to work, it can actually reduce your chances of achieving your goals. Why? Because when you vividly imagine success, your brain gets a little hit of the reward chemicals. It feels like you've already achieved the thing, and that reduces your motivation to actually do the hard work required to get there. You've essentially tricked your brain into thinking the job's done. The studies are wild. In one experiment, people who visualized themselves acing an exam actually studied less and scored worse than people who didn't visualize at all. Ollie read this and felt genuinely annoyed. He'd wasted months on a technique that was actively sabotaging him. But here's where Wiseman gets interesting. He doesn't just tear things down, he offers alternatives, things that actually work. And the alternative to positive visualization? Process visualization combined with something called doublethink. Instead of imagining yourself having achieved the goal, you imagine yourself doing the work to achieve it. You visualize the process, not the outcome. Even better, you engage in doublethink. You imagine both the benefits of succeeding and the obstacles you'll face along the way. Ollie tried this with a goal he'd been failing at for years, getting fitter. Instead of picturing himself with abs, which had never worked, he spent a few minutes each morning picturing himself putting on his trainers, walking to the gym, and doing the actual workout. He visualized the boring bits, the effort, the sweat, and he also imagined the obstacles. What would happen if he felt tired after work? What would he tell himself when he wanted to skip a session? By mentally rehearsing both the process and the problems, he was preparing his brain for reality, not fantasy. Mate, it worked. Within 3 weeks, Ollie had been to the gym more times than he had in the previous 6 months. Not because he suddenly became motivated, but because he'd stopped relying on a technique that was literally making him less likely to succeed. All right, so Ollie's getting fitter. Good start. But there was a bigger problem. He was unhappy. Not depressed, he'd been assessed for that. Just persistently unsatisfied. Like there was a baseline level of discontent that never shifted, no matter what happened. Good things would happen. A student would thank him, he'd get a nice comment from a parent, Arsenal would win, and he'd feel briefly good before returning to his default state of meh. Now, Wiseman addresses this in 59 seconds, and his solution is so simple it almost seems ridiculous. The gratitude journal. But wait, before you roll your eyes, this isn't the vague, just be grateful advice you've heard a million times. Wiseman is very specific about how to do this based on the research. Here's what actually works. Once a week, not every day, once a week, you write down 5 things you're genuinely grateful for. They have to be specific, and they have to be things that actually happened that week. Not, I'm grateful for my health. That's too vague. More like, I'm grateful that my colleague Sarah covered my lesson on Thursday when I was feeling rough. The specificity matters. The weekly timing matters. Daily gratitude journals actually lose their impact because they become routine. Your brain stops paying attention. Ollie started this on a Sunday evening. He'd sit with a cup of tea, Yorkshire tea, naturally, and write down 5 things from the week. At first, it felt awkward. He wasn't used to thinking this way. His brain naturally defaulted to problems, complaints, things that had gone wrong. But by week 3, something shifted. He started noticing good things during the week, not just when he sat down to write. His brain was actively scanning for positives because it knew it would need them on Sunday. This is what psychologists call attention retraining. You're literally teaching your brain to notice different things. And here's the wild part. Studies show that people who do this for just 8 weeks show measurable increases in happiness that persist for months afterward. Not years of therapy, not expensive retreats, just 5 things, once a week for 8 weeks. Ollie's default state started shifting. The meh lifted slightly. He found himself complaining less in the staff room, noticing when things went well rather than just when they went badly. 59 seconds a week, maybe less. Right, now we need to talk about something that happened to Ollie around February. He broke up with his girlfriend, Hannah, about a year before this story starts. And he'd been handling it in the way that most people handle breakups, trying not to think about it. Every time a memory popped up, he'd push it down. Every time he felt sad about it, he'd distract himself. Every time he saw something that reminded him of her, he'd actively think about something else. This is what psychologists call thought suppression, and most of us assume it works. It doesn't. At all. Wiseman covers this in detail. There's a famous study called the white bear experiment. Researchers told participants, whatever you do, don't think about a white bear. What happened? Everyone immediately thought about a white bear, and not just once, they became obsessed with it. The instruction not to think about something makes you think about it more. This is called the ironic rebound effect, and it applies to everything. Painful memories, anxieties, cravings, all of it. When Ollie tried to suppress thoughts about Hannah, he was actually strengthening them. Every time he pushed the thought away, his brain flagged it as more important, and it came back stronger. So what actually works? Wiseman recommends 2 alternatives based on the research. First, expressive writing. Instead of suppressing difficult thoughts, you write about them. Not to anyone, this isn't about sharing, but just to get them out of your head and onto paper. The research shows that spending just 15 minutes a day for 4 days writing about a traumatic or difficult experience leads to significant improvements in mental and physical health. Not talking about it endlessly, not analyzing it forever, just writing privately for 4 short sessions. Ollie tried this with the breakup. He set a timer for 15 minutes and just wrote. Whatever came up, the anger, the sadness, the confusion, the embarrassing things he missed about her. Nobody was going to read it. He could be completely honest. The first session was hard, painful actually. He cried a bit, which surprised him. But by the 4th session, something had shifted. The breakup felt less charged, like it had been processed and filed away properly, rather than lurking in his subconscious. Second technique, distanced self-talk. Instead of thinking, I'm sad about the breakup, you think, Ollie is sad about the breakup. Sounds weird, but the research is solid. When you refer to yourself in the third person, you create psychological distance. You become more objective. The emotion feels less overwhelming because you're observing it rather than being consumed by it. Ollie started doing this whenever difficult thoughts arose. Ollie's feeling anxious about that parent meeting. Ollie's worried about money this month. It felt ridiculous at first, but it worked. The thoughts lost their grip. All right, we're about halfway through Ollie's journey, and I want to take a quick moment. If this is resonating with you, if Ollie's story is hitting home, please do me a favor and smash that like button. It genuinely helps the channel, and it tells me that this kind of content is valuable. And if you want more videos like this, deep dives into books that actually change how you think and live, subscribe and turn on notifications. We're putting out new stuff every week. Right, back to Ollie. So Ollie's getting fitter, feeling happier, processing his breakup. Things are looking up, and then he gets a job offer. A mate from university, bloke called James who'd gone into the private sector, reached out. His company was looking for someone to run their corporate training division, basically teaching adults instead of teenagers for significantly more money. On paper, it was a no-brainer. Better salary, less stress, no more marking coursework at midnight. But Ollie was paralyzed. He made lists, pros and cons, weighted scores, the whole thing. He talked to everyone, Charlie, his mum, his sister, random colleagues in the staff room. He researched the company obsessively, read every Glassdoor review. LinkedIn stalked everyone who worked there. 2 weeks later, he still couldn't decide. This is where Wiseman's chapter on decision-making became essential. Here's what the research shows. More deliberation doesn't lead to better decisions. In fact, for complex choices, overthinking actually makes things worse. There's a brilliant study where people were asked to choose between different jam flavors. One group analyzed their options carefully. The other group went with their gut. The gut decision group ended up happier with their choices. Why? Because when you overthink, you give weight to factors that don't actually matter to you. You talk yourself into things, or out of things, based on logic that sounds sensible but doesn't reflect your actual values. Your unconscious mind, meanwhile, has already processed all the relevant information. Your gut feeling isn't random. It's the sum total of everything you know, filtered through your genuine priorities. Wiseman recommends a technique he calls unconscious deliberation. Here's how it works. Before making a big decision, distract yourself with something cognitively engaging for a few minutes. A puzzle, a game, something that occupies your conscious mind. Then, ask yourself what you want to do. Don't reanalyze, just ask. The answer that comes up is usually right. Not always, but statistically more reliable than endless deliberation. Ollie tried this. He stopped researching, stopped making lists, and spent 20 minutes doing Wordle and some Sudoku puzzles. Then he asked himself, do I want this job? The answer that came up instantly was no. He didn't know why exactly. The logic still said yes, but his gut said no, and he trusted it. He turned down the offer, and here's the thing. 6 months later, he heard from James that the company had gone through major restructuring. Half the training team had been laid off. Ollie's gut had known something his spreadsheets didn't. Around May, Ollie had a problem at work. There was a proposal he wanted to push through, changing how the history department taught the module on World War I. He'd done research, he had evidence, he genuinely believed it would be better for the students. But his head of department, a woman called Margaret, was resistant. She'd been teaching the same way for 22 years and saw no reason to change. Ollie had tried arguing his case, presented the data, explained the benefits. Margaret just dug in deeper. Now, Wiseman has a fascinating section on persuasion, and it's full of counterintuitive insights. One of the most powerful? The Benjamin Franklin effect. The story goes that Benjamin Franklin wanted to win over a political rival. Instead of doing favors for the man, Franklin asked the rival to do a favor for him, specifically to lend him a rare book. The rival agreed, and afterward, he was warmer toward Franklin than ever before. Why does this work? Because of something psychologists call cognitive dissonance. When the rival did a favor for Franklin, his brain needed to justify the behavior. Why would I help someone I dislike? I must not dislike them as much as I thought. By acting in a friendly way, he convinced himself he felt friendly. Ollie tried this with Margaret. Instead of continuing to argue his case, he went to her and asked for advice. "Margaret, I'm struggling with how to teach the poetry of the trenches. You've been doing this for years. What works for you?" Margaret, who'd been defensive, suddenly softened. She spent 20 minutes sharing her methods, clearly enjoying being asked. And here's the thing. After that conversation, she was much more open to Ollie's ideas about reforming the module. Not because he'd convinced her with logic, because he'd triggered the Benjamin Franklin effect. She'd helped him, therefore she must like him. Therefore, his ideas deserved consideration. The curriculum change got approved 2 months later. Ollie hadn't changed his argument, he'd changed his approach. All right, we're in summer now, July. Ollie's been applying Wiseman's principles for about 8 months, and something was bothering him. He'd set himself goals at the start of the year, fitness goals, professional development goals, all that. And while he was making progress, he noticed something. Whenever he hit a target, the satisfaction was brief. He'd feel good for maybe a day, and then immediately focus on the next thing. The goalpost kept moving. He was achieving more than ever, but not feeling any better about it. Wiseman addresses this in his chapter on motivation, and the insight absolutely changed how Ollie approached goals. The problem with outcome goals. Most of us set goals that are about outcomes. Lose 10 pounds, get promoted, run a marathon. These seem specific and motivating, but research shows they have a significant downside. Your happiness becomes contingent on external results. You either achieve the goal, brief satisfaction, then emptiness, or you fail, disappointment, self-criticism. Either way, you don't win. The alternative? Process goals combined with identity statements. Instead of, "I want to lose 10 pounds, you say, "I'm the kind of person who exercises regularly." Instead of, "I want to get promoted," you say, "I'm someone who does excellent work and develops my skills." The focus shifts from the destination to the journey. And crucially, you can succeed every single day. Did you exercise today? Success. Did you do good work? Success. This is backed by some brilliant research on habit formation. When people frame their goals in terms of identity rather than outcomes, they're significantly more likely to sustain the behaviour long term. Because it stops being about what you're trying to achieve and starts being about who you are. Ollie rewrote his goals. Instead of "get fitter," he wrote, "I'm someone who moves my body every day." Instead of "be a better teacher," he wrote, "I'm a teacher who is always learning and improving." Instead of "be happier," he wrote, "I'm someone who notices and appreciates the good things in my life." The shift was subtle but profound. He stopped chasing milestones and started living according to values. One more thing happened to Ollie that year, and it's probably the most important. Around October, he met someone, a woman called Nadia, maths teacher at a school in Islington. They met at a teaching conference, both of them hiding at the back, making sarcastic comments about the keynote speaker. They got coffee afterward, then dinner. Things were going well. But Ollie was terrified of messing it up. His last relationship had ended badly. He'd been, in his own words, rubbish at communicating. He'd avoid difficult conversations, assume the worst, let resentments build up until they exploded. He didn't want to repeat that pattern. Wiseman's chapter on relationships was particularly useful here. One of the key findings, the importance of the first few minutes. Research shows that couples who have positive interactions in the first few minutes of being reunited, after work, after time apart, are significantly more likely to have successful relationships. This sounds obvious, but think about what most people do. They walk through the door, maybe grunt a hello, immediately start venting about their day or checking their phone. Wiseman recommends a simple practice. For the first few minutes when you see your partner, be fully present. Put the phone away. Make eye contact. Ask how they are and actually listen. This small change builds what psychologists call emotional capital. And that capital is what you draw on when things get difficult. Ollie implemented this with Nadia from the start. Every time they saw each other, the first few minutes were sacred. No phones, no distractions, full attention. It felt slightly unnatural at first. They'd both become so used to divided attention. But it made a noticeable difference. Their connection deepened faster. There's another Wiseman insight that helped: the power of self-disclosure. Research shows that intimacy accelerates dramatically when people share personal, vulnerable information with each other. Not all at once, that's overwhelming, but gradually, reciprocally, going slightly deeper with each conversation. The mistake most people make? They keep things surface level for too long. Safe topics, small talk, nothing too revealing. But real connection requires risk. You have to share something real to get something real back. Ollie made a conscious effort to be more open with Nadia than he'd been with anyone before. Not in a heavy therapy session way, just honestly answering questions, sharing his actual thoughts, admitting when he was nervous or uncertain. And Nadia responded in kind. Within a few months, their relationship had a depth that Ollie's previous one had never reached. So, where is Ollie now? It's been about a year since he discovered 59 seconds. He's still teaching in Hackney. Turned out he loved it when he stopped seeing it as a stepping stone to something better. He's still with Nadia. They moved in together last month, flat in Dalston, close to both their schools. She's become close with Charlie. They all go to the pub together most Fridays. He's fitter than he's been since his 20s. Not dramatically, he's not running marathons, but consistently. He's the kind of person who exercises regularly. That's just who he is now. And the grey dissatisfaction that used to hang over everything, largely gone. Not because his life is perfect, it's not. Difficult students still stress him out. Money's still tight. The rent in London is still outrageous. But he's got tools now. Actual, evidence-based tools. Things that take less than a minute to implement and actually make a measurable difference. That's what I love about Richard Wiseman's approach. It's not about reinventing yourself or finding your inner warrior or any of that nonsense. It's about small things, specific things, things backed by research, not just vibes. Write down 5 things you're grateful for once a week. Visualize the process, not the outcome. Stop suppressing negative thoughts. Write about them instead. Trust your gut on complex decisions. Ask people for favors if you want them to like you. Frame your goals as identity statements. Tiny interventions, massive results. Ollie threw out his old self-help books, by the way. Well, most of them. Kept a few for sentimental reasons. But 59 seconds has a permanent spot on his shelf. Tattered now, pages dog-eared, notes in the margins. Because it's the one that actually worked. Right, before we finish, let me give you the key principles from Ollie's journey and Richard Wiseman's book. 1. Stop visualizing outcomes. Visualize the process instead. Picture yourself doing the work, not having achieved the result. 2. Keep a weekly gratitude journal. 5 specific things, once a week. Not daily, you'll habituate. Weekly is the sweet spot. 3. Don't suppress negative thoughts. Write about them. 15 minutes a day for 4 days can process even significant trauma. 4. For complex decisions, stop deliberating. Distract yourself, then ask your gut. 5. If you want someone to like you, ask them for a small favor. The Benjamin Franklin effect is remarkably powerful. 6. Frame goals as identity statements, not outcomes. Be the kind of person who does the thing rather than chasing the result. 7. In relationships, protect the first few minutes. Full presence, no distractions, genuine attention. All of these take less than a minute to do. That's the whole point. You don't need a weekend retreat. You don't need an expensive coach. You don't need to meditate for 2 hours a day. You need 59 seconds and the willingness to trust the science. Thanks for watching, everyone. If this was useful, if Ollie's story landed, do me a favor and smash that like button. And if you want more content like this, evidence-based deep dives into books that actually make a difference, subscribe and hit that notification bell. We've got loads more coming. Leave a comment below telling me, which technique are you going to try first? I read all of them, and I genuinely want to know what resonates. Until next time, take care of yourselves. And remember, small changes properly implemented change everything.